Who's going to love our kids more than you do or more than we do? Your wife, she feels a calling to do this, then you absolutely want to come alongside.
If she feels really valued and supported, that just goes a long way with her being able to wake up and feel like her husband's grateful and proud of the work that she's doing and pouring into our kids.
You absolutely want to come alongside because where God guides, God provides. He will equip the family unit.
Welcome back to the Colorado Homeschool Podcast, where we know you can do this. If you are feeling called to homeschooling, you absolutely can do it. And you know, the thing that I hear most frequently is, but my husband's not on board, or my husband is a skeptic, or can my husband be involved, or even the comparison trap. We're going to talk about those things. Listen, it was how we started. My husband was not the one who had the vision or the idea of homeschooling, but he reluctantly supported me. And it wasn't that long before it was his vision and everything changed. So hopefully this conversation is encouragement for you. We're so glad that you're here. Thanks for joining us today. Well, thank you for joining us on the Colorado Homeschool Podcast. I am very excited for today because I get to introduce you to my beloved husband, Brandon Davis. Hi, honey. We wanted to talk to fathers because when I'm talking to homeschool moms all the time, one of the biggest questions that I get is how to get your fathers involved. So we're going to talk about that. But before we do, let me tell you about my sweet husband. We've been married for 31 years. I cannot even believe it. We have 2 grown children who also have children. We have grandkids who are being homeschooled as well. Obviously, we did homeschool ours, and that is what we're going to talk about. My husband is an associate pastor at the church that we're at right now, so we have our hands full. We've been in ministry our whole life, really, since becoming believers, and homeschooling was just part of that, right? Do you remember when I first came to you and said, hey, what do you think about homeschooling? Do you have any direct memory of it? You do.
I can go back in time and recall the sentiment and the feelings that I had when the subject matter.
Okay, well, tell us. What did you think?
Well, it was a foreign concept to me. I was a public school raised kid that's all I knew, actually. And so didn't have really a point of reference for homeschooling, the background, and even the thought process behind why you would even want to consider it. So.
Yeah, well, and honestly, it was a new thought for me too. We lived in, at the time, Memphis, Tennessee. And in that place, I met some homeschool families. And they're the ones who kind of planted the seed. And our children were still young. So when we moved to Albuquerque and school age came, I remember going, what do you think about homeschooling, honey? And I was just as trepidatious as you, honestly. A lot of homeschool families, when I'm talking to them, and they're very like, how do I get my husband on board? He's not so sure. And I remember in some of our early days having days of tears or rough days when you would come home from work and, I would explain something to you and your first instinct was, well, we can put him in school. It was like a sucker punch initially because we weren't on the same page necessarily. You weren't opposed to homeschooling, but you weren't on board. What was your thought whenever I would have a rough day and say, maybe, well, let's problem solve this?
Right. Well, my initial thought was obviously let's put him in school because that my default would be, well, I turned out okay, and what's the harm in putting him in school? But at the end of the day, I think the longer time went by, I realized that it was extremely important to have a hand in their education and just from a scriptural standpoint, right? Who's going to love our kids more than you do or more than we do. So in the very beginning, it was moving from ignorance to really understanding the bigger picture and having a vision for our family and having a vision for what type of young men and young women that we wanted to raise.
Right. We have 2 children, a boy and a girl, and they both turned out fantastic. We're very proud of them. And they're seeking their relationship with the Lord and walking in that, which was the ultimate goal. So that was just early days because you did get on board.
I did.
Let's talk about some funny stories because we used this curriculum called Matthew C. It still is around. Brandon, tell me the story of this math and you thought, what in the world are you teaching our children?
I do remember the curriculum being Matthew C. And
Which,
I
by the way,
remember,
we continued with and loved in the end. It was just the foundational way that they taught. Brandon was like, what?
is it 2T5
It was
or
Yeah, it was one, instead of saying teens, instead of saying 11, 12, 13, 14, they taught the kids the decimal system and they really wanted that to be emphasized. So it was when you got to 10, it was 1T instead of
1T?
10. And then instead of 11, it was 1T1. And then 12 was 1T2. And 13 was 1T3. And I remember we were doing this, like, so proud to show you. Andolyn is like 5 and we're learning the numbers. And you were like, what?
And I could only picture, someone at the grocery store saying, "And how old are you?" "I'm 1T1."
I just
Yeah.
thought that was so funny. But I mean, we chuckle about it because it was just a teaching methodology. Obviously, the children learned 11, 12, 13, 14, etc. But it was their method, which by the way, I still really, really love Matthew C. I think it's a fantastic program. We used it all the way through high school too. That concept was just interesting. And I just remember that conversation. And it was, again, very early days. We're talking kindergarten before anything happened. But in my mind, everything changed when you came with us to the homeschool conference. Do you remember that experience? And was there anything about that stood out to you?
Yes. Well, the homeschool conference first, I knew we weren't alone because of the co-ops that we participated in, but it gave me a broader and bigger picture that there are entire families, that it's a family thing. It's not just a mom thing. It's not just a dad thing, but it's a collective. And so the homeschool conference, it impacted me a lot. I remember one of the speakers, I believe his name was Vodi Bakum, and just his perspective on homeschooling and really, really encouraging the men in the role that we could play in the education of our kids.
Yeah. That is when it shifted. And it was like, this isn't just about having my children home because of moving and wanting stability, which is what it started with. It quickly grew into so much more because, the world will try to tell us that education can be neutral, like public schools can be neutral. And there's no way. There is a worldview being taught in every form of
100%.
education. Yeah. And I loved when that became your passion too, when you understood it. And we talked about we talked about the math lessons, obviously, and the 1T1. We got over that quickly.
We did.
And you were so supportive.
And I'll tell you, my support really stemmed from the results, and the results that I was able to see in our kids. Kudos to you, because I do think that you provided our kids a love for learning and how to learn. So just having a love for learning and then how to go about getting the information to process. And so when I saw the results and saw how our kids were able to interact with not only kids their age, but play with kids younger than them, and then play with kids older than them, and then interact with adults, it blew me away, in the sense that when other people would hear that, yes, we homeschooled, and then they would be befuddled, they'd be shocked, like, I thought, they had this perception of how homeschoolers should behave or interact, and none of those markings were present in our kids. They were very well adjusted and could navigate and interact with any demographic or age group of people.
Yeah, we joke. I mean, I said this already, but we've been in ministry very early on from being believers, and we're both radically transformed by Jesus, right? And as we're serving, we were doing school at church. I worked part-time at the church plant that we participated in here in Colorado, and the kids did more school at church than at home. So that flexibility was major in having our kids around lots of different diverse groups. We definitely were able to do that. That's awesome.
What are you going to be doing June 11th through 13th? If you're wondering, why don't you join me at the Rocky Mountain Homeschool Conference? You guys, I want to personally invite you there. My name's Brandy Gillum, and I'm the conference director. You guys, we have shopping and speakers, a phenomenal homeschooling community, and so much more. Go to RockyMountainHomeschoolConference.com to learn more.
What would you say if you look back at, the children? Obviously, we talked a lot about the kindergarten years, just because I know moms can relate to that, where they feel like my husband isn't really on board, and what if I fail? So it's like this terrible paradox of my husband is being supportive, but it's not really his vision yet. and I think I'm going to fail, which is such a lie from the enemy. Like every
It
mom
is.
feels like they're not equipped or they're not going to do it right. So now that we're well advanced and finished and our grandkids are now being homeschooled, what's your perspective on that?
Right. I would say there really wasn't anything that you could say to sway the needle. It was me being put in situations, whether it be the homeschool conference, or I could interact and talk with other dads, or talk with a couple that had multiple kids and had homeschooled and had teenagers, and that was well beyond where we were at. So I could really understand what the end result could potentially be. And once you start to see that, you go, well, and then again, let's not forget about the test scores and just the metrics, right? If you just want to go pure metrics, at every juncture, our kids really performed at a higher level than they would if they were in public school. It's just no comparison. There's no comparison.
Yeah. Academically, it was awesome. The time that we had together as a family was awesome. Because I mean, goodness, it's so cliche, but it goes by quick. It's like, I can't even believe that we have grandkids, right?
Right, right,
It's
right,
so
right.
crazy. I don't regret any of those days that we had with them, even the days that we would fight over grammar lessons or math lessons, and the days that I would come to you and go, honey, this is too hard.
Keisha, I think it's a testament. We're talking about these things, but I think, again, I'm a data-driven person, and the proof is in the pudding. I think when you can see that our son and our daughter-in-law, they're going the homeschool route, and our daughter's going the homeschool route, it says a lot because of how it impacted them, and they are able to see the benefits and see the fruits of it, of the work and the effort that we put into. And it being God-centered, right? Having a God-centered education is more than a needle mover.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was important. Well, what would you say to the fathers who maybe are feeling a little bit, like you said, like, why would you not do public school? Well, I turned out fine. Do you have any words of encouragement to them when their wife is feeling the call to do this?
Yes, yes. One, I would say first, pray. Number one, pray. Pray. I know that the Lord has kids are a blessing, and He's allowed us to have kids, and it's incumbent upon us to rear them in the ways of the Lord, and understanding that there's no one on this planet that's going to love your child more than you love them. No teacher, no counselor. There can be a love, but it's not going to be the love of a parent. Again, I'm speaking from experience here. One of the things that I was trepidatious about was, well, what are your credentials? You've never taught before. And the way homeschooling works is it's not traditional. It's not how you sit in the classroom, but it was experiential
Yeah.
and
Alongside, we were doing it together. Exactly.
yeah, and again, that spawned, I think, a love for learning, because then we were able to focus on things that the kids actually enjoyed and liked and flourished. That in terms of encouragement, I would say fathers connect with other fathers that are already ahead of where you're currently at, because you can't really catch the vision and really understand where you're going unless you know that, hey, this is a real possibility. Get connected sooner than later. Don't wait. Get connected sooner than later, and don't be afraid to ask those tough questions, because there's a lot of preconceived notions that you could have about homeschooling and how you think it's going to go. But again, you don't know what you don't know until you're exposed to something different. And I think that would be my word is, hey, don't knock it. There's a reason why the stats and the results show that homeschoolers are sought after from an academic standpoint. And then certainly just from a interacting with their peers, or with just like the example that I gave before, that they become advanced human beings quickly because of the environments and circumstances that they're put in from a homeschooling perspective.
Yeah, it was a really great journey for us. It was fun. There were hard days for sure. And the difference when it was your passion and not just my passion, that was night and day. And it didn't take long. It just took, like you said, getting you plugged in, getting you to see other people, being involved, seeing the results, also, I mean, even the little results from kindergarten. I mean, we have home videos. We just went to our granddaughter's graduation for her, a homeschool granddaughter, for her kindergarten graduation. It was so sweet and it was so nostalgic because we did the
Very,
same. Do you
very.
remember those early day events?
Yes, especially, I guess the culmination or the end where there would be an award ceremony and just
Or some kind
how
of presentation? They would always do something to show you, look, Daddy, look what we did.
yes.
Yeah.
And I just remember being so proud of the kids and not just our kids, but the other kids, because you can see how far they've come. And again, there's something to be said about ironing,
Yeah.
sharpening iron.
What is one nugget on, the guy who is bearing the burden of working because there were sacrifices made for us to be a single income family. Do you have one little nugget you would leave to a dad to encourage him in this
Yes.
endeavor if they're considering homeschooling?
Absolutely. I would say understanding that, and again, it's not just homeschooling, but just whether it be just relationally with your wife. The one question that I would challenge husbands to ask is, how can I serve you best? How can I serve you best? And then you fill in the blank as it relates to homeschooling, as it relates to you fill in the blank. As believers, we're called to die to ourselves and to esteem others as better than yourselves. If you can put yourself in a position where you are coming alongside and wanting to be the hands and feet, playing some kind of role when you have the availability, then it becomes not just a mom thing, but it's a us thing.
Family thing.
It's a family thing. And so I would say that how can you come alongside and ask that question? How can I serve you best in because there's a lot of other things that moms juggle, not just homeschooling, but managing the home and a litany of other things. So understanding, as a speaking from experience, being a kind of the breadwinner or working full time, one of the things that I look back on is that is critical. How can I come alongside and be a helpmate and not antagonize or not be a detractor for what we're trying to do from a family perspective.
Yeah, and I will say, just to close on a high note of exhorting my husband, I love you. He was so good at being my cheerleader. Even in the early days when he was like, well, let's just put them in school. That came from a heart of trying to solve my pain. It changed, obviously, into being a vision and problem solving the issue. But you've always been, Brandon I can do anything according to my husband. I'm like the best at everything according to him, but that's not a bad thing for you to do for your wife. So
Encouragement.
Thank you. Well, again, thanks for being here. And for you wives who maybe feel like your husband isn't, you can do this. Just invite him into the conversation.
Amen.
You guys are in for a surprise treat because you got to meet my husband already. Now you get to meet my son. Yes, my son. It's crazy. I obviously homeschooled my son, and now he, a father of almost 4, is also a homeschool father. So please welcome Caedon, my sweet, adorable son. He's a grown man now, and he's doing this interview from his work van. He is an electrician out and about in between calls right now. So Caedon, thank you for carving out some time to be here today.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit, just one sentence, how you would summarize being a homeschool student yourself? Like, what were some of the perks that you saw as being a student?
I would just say, first and foremost, the flexibility, just, ability to pursue different avenues that kind of interested me more so. Also, just, ability to work with different work schedules. It seemed like we were always doing homeschool at a different location, whether it was at, the church or on a field trip, whatever. Just, being able to do life together and learn at the same time. So that was kind of the defining, I think, the way I would define my homeschool upbringing.
I love that. I have to tell you, since I started working at Czech, I literally have told my kids, wow, I don't think I was a very good homeschool mom, which is so funny because this is the lie that every homeschool mom says. And my son has been so sweet in combating that. insecurity. And he's like, Mom, you did a great job. As you can see, my son is doing very well as an adult. The most important thing is both my children are walking with the Lord, and amen and amen. Changing that family tree and trajectory in our life was so important. So thank you for being that encouragement to me too. So what we are talking about today is just fathers. Like I hear all the time when I'm talking to homeschool families, I usually talk to the moms and they don't know how to involve their husbands and how to get them involved. Now, your story is a little different because you were a homeschool student, but let's just start with the kindergarten graduation ceremony that we just did for your sweet daughter, my lovely granddaughter.
Yeah, that was great. We have a co-op that we do with a couple of families, and just had a little kindergarten ceremony for Addison. And yeah, it was fun. We got to, kind of celebrate Addie, and she got a little treat to celebrate. It's funny, I can see now a fire kind of lit in Mason, my son, who's just below her in age, because I think he saw a lot of that praise and the accolades coming towards her. And he's now all of a sudden very motivated in school. This morning we came downstairs and he was working on his handwriting, just unprompted. We didn't even know he was awake, actually. We just walked into the other room and he was at the dining room table working on his writing. So definitely good to know. That's a good motivator for him. But yeah, it's just fun just being able to celebrate, anytime the kids are accomplishing things, they really enjoy to be encouraged in that.
Yeah. So what do you see as your role in homeschooling for your family?
Number one, just supporting Brienne. Just making sure that she feels equipped and confident, and that I'm on her side and on her team, and that she's appreciated, because it is a lot of work. And ultimately I think that if she feels really valued and supported for the value that she's bringing to the family, that just goes a long way with her being able to wake up and feel like her husband's really grateful and proud of the work that she's doing and pouring into our kids. So that would be number one. And then number two, I think, is just being involved as much as I can. I know that it does offer you some flexibility being able to homeschool, so taking advantage of that flexibility as much as possible, not having a strict schedule of doing school Monday through Friday, 8 to 3 or whatever. Having some days where I'm doing the homeschool, after work, I get home in the evenings when my schedule's a little bit different, just taking whatever time I can to be there and taking advantage of that flexibility, because not everybody has that.
My son lives just about 30 minutes from me, and I get to see them frequently. So his work schedule is pretty flexible, on and off, doing electric work, but he's also an entrepreneur and it's always doing something. So he's got quite the flexible schedule. And I love that your family just adapts so that they get more time with you. So I don't know if you know this, Caedon, if I've ever shared it with you, but the average American family gets 45 minutes a day of quality time together. I know it's absolutely heartbreaking. And the caveat is quality time. So they don't count things like homework time for the kids in school, or in the morning routine, brushing teeth, eating breakfast, getting ready, but like sitting and talking and engaging with one another. And that is so opposite in homeschooling. So I love that, to hear that you're participating. That is not common for a lot of the fathers. Do you have any advice to the mom maybe who feels like, I don't know how to get my husband involved?
Definitely would depend on the situation. Everybody's work schedule is different. So for some people, maybe, this advice wouldn't apply, but asking questions, and Brienne is always asking my opinion, whether it's on a curriculum or the way I, view an approach on some certain topic. She's always trying to bring me in. And I think because she really wants me to be involved. And I think most women probably do. They don't want to feel like they're just kind of doing this thing by themselves. Just asking, not being afraid to ask and, say, hey, I have a question about this, a question about that. If the request is out there, then most people will meet it. So the more you're asking, I guess, the more involved, the easier it is to get involved.
What I love about what you're saying, and I have seen this in you, you were definitely your wife's cheerleader. And it's funny because I don't know a single homeschool mom that doesn't have insecurities that they're doing something wrong. I think there's cultural pressure that you need an expert to raise your kids, which I don't believe is true, but we fight it subconsciously even. And even as a homeschool mom who successfully raised her children, and you guys have launched and you're great, thriving adults, me and those doubts, you really helped me with that. And I've seen you with with Brianne. And I love that it's a community event, even though she does most of the work. She is the one organizing the events. And even that graduation ceremony, you could clearly see the moms were in charge in running the event, but the dads were still very much a part of the celebration as well. So it's so fun. I have to tell you, selfishly, from my perspective, it is like deja vu watching Addison's graduation ceremony. I remember doing very similar events when you guys were younger, and it was so precious to see the continuation of it and just the bonds, like the connection of your family. It's so precious. One other thing that I know that you guys do a lot is reading books, and that maybe isn't part of the curriculum, but how does that work into, because I know like you guys have read the Chronicles of Narnia as a family. How does that work? Do you just dedicate a certain time to read together, or is this something that it was just here and there, or was it consistent? How did that pan out?
Yeah, so for a while we were doing story time at bedtime every night. And this was one really cool way for me to get involved in the education, just because, we would read a story and then we would have 10 or 15 minutes where we would just kind of lay down in bed together and snuggle, and they would ask me questions, just questions about the story, questions about the book. And, that just leads to a whole range of different topics about everything. It just goes down the rabbit hole, and, we leave that conversation thinking, wow, we just covered like 4 different subjects and all these different topics and theology and science and all these things. So stories are just incredible practical ways for the husband to get involved. If that's one of your primary sources of entertainment in the home, even movies as well, any kind of story, and then inviting the kids into being curious and asking questions, and it just leading to a whole bunch of different, fun conversations. So reading books together is kind of our first go-to entertainment. When I'm home from work after dinner, if we want to do something, if we're not playing outside, we try to go to reading a book as a family together, and then discussing it and talking, and that being a form of, family education.
Yeah. I love that you also said 10 or 15 minutes, because I know some fathers just feel overwhelmed, like the pressure to be the breadwinner and the provider. That's significant. And a lot of families sacrifice. So like you guys are, for your wife to be home and raising the kids, that does put a lot of all the onus on you. And in Colorado, it's just absurd. But it doesn't take, you don't have to spend hours and hours. That 10 or 15 minutes can be an intentional input and connection. And I hope that encourages fathers when they hear that it doesn't take a whole lot. Be involved in those conversations. So good. Well, Caedon, thanks for carving out a little bit of time in the middle of your workday to jump on and let the audience meet my fantastic son. And I hope you have a great day. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mama. Thanks for having me. Love you.
Love you too. Thank you so much for joining us today. The Colorado Homeschool Podcast is a ministry of Christian Home Educators of Colorado. We have been motivating parents to disciple the next generation by embracing home discipleship that is Christ-centered, parent-directed, and free from government control. We invite you to join us in this mission. If you want to support homeschooling in Colorado, go to check.org/donate. In the meantime, share this with your friends and make sure you subscribe. That really helps us. Thank you.